So hi everyone, I'm showing that we're live on Facebook. I will give people a minute or so to find us. This is for the 4 p.m. live cast today. We have 3 live casts today on ICM. This is pretty exciting for me to have these conversations. So it looks like we're rolling live. I'm going to share this over to my personal page and then we'll get started. Okay, so welcome everybody to the 4 p.m. live cast here on Mindful Ohio and the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. I'm being joined today by Kimberly Patterson, who I do not know personally, but that's never been a deal breaker for me to bring people on and have some great conversations. I actually met Kimberly a few weeks ago when her friend, Janice Kaufman-Young, who was one of my dear friends from graduate school and is still a dear friend, was on. And I enjoyed Kimberly's comments and insights. And then I was so delighted when she expressed a willingness to come on and have a conversation with me today as part of the Black Lives Matter series that we've been doing. And so Kimberly's talk title today is Mixed Messages, Exploring Racial Identity, because in this conversation about Black identity and Black Lives Matter, often the voice of people who identify as biracial or multiracial gets missed. So Kimberly is here to offer us some beautiful lived experience today. So welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to actually just speak my story and possibly just reach the one, who needs to maybe hear that looking like me and identifying as an African American, which will probably shock a lot of people, that might help someone. I mean, I'm 54 and never really thought too much about saying that I was African American, just simply because that is what I identify with. That is how, I came up. It wasn't anything that was taught. It wasn't anything that was spoken, so to speak, in the household, and I think that we have to know how to navigate conversation, especially in this day and age where someone will give us a chance to speak and share the story and have an open conversation and an open dialogue. And I'm just glad to represent the best of what I think is, I've always been told, the both worlds colliding at one time. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So take us back 54 years and tell us what you're willing to share about your story.
54 years ago. Well, I think it began prior to 54. It actually kind of somewhere along the line prior to my arrival. They hooked up in my mother and father, who my father is an African-American man, Black man, and my mom is white, Serbian, Finnish, and Swedish on her side. But they hooked up in 64. Got together and created me and decided that I was going to be showing up somewhere along the line in 66. And they got married in 65 in Ohio. It was against the law in multiple states for that to be done. Ohio just happened to be a good one for them to do it in. That's where we still reside and live. But they didn't see that. Like when people say that they didn't see race, they didn't see it. Now, my granny saw it, which is, I'm sure my grandmother saw it, which is my mom's mom. She was the only other white person, so to speak, that I can say that I knew that coming up from the time I was born. She was it. It was my mom and my grandma. And she never had a race issue whatsoever. She was domestic help, my mom's mom, and she came up, poor. They lived in the poorer neighborhoods and identified with the lower income people, but they also worked in and lived in the house of who they came up with as my mom was coming up. They lived in like an attic of the rich people that they were working for, the bankers and things, as my grandma was domestic help. So that's a little backstory of her. My dad come up typical, typical young man here in Steubenville in the North End, and was raised in a mixed, so to speak, environment. He had mixed friends coming up. So it was not something that was taught to me so much to as identify, but it was the raising of it that kind of put me in a position to just say, okay, I've never had to see anything that I had to, like you and I prior were discussing, I've never had to defend the white skin. I've never had to defend that. I've never had to see that being defended as I've seen my family, my dad having to defend his blackness. And it's not that he's a was a pro Black Power movement guy. He just was discriminated against. My stories and heritage and the things that I heard coming up was just very discriminatory. Hush, hush, passing, don't pass, do pass, you could pass if like just things that, you shouldn't have to think of as a kid, which I really didn't until I had to kind of think of it as a kid.
Do you remember one of the first times it came into your awareness?
Yeah, I can. I can remember being in elementary school, and I remember being on the playground, and the people from my neighborhood, we grew up in a mixed neighborhood, so it was wonderful in that environment. But there were kids that weren't from my neighborhood that were there that now ended up being pretty awesome friends coming up once they figured out that I wasn't, that I was kind of like one of them, so to speak. I remember playing on the playground, and there was a little white girl, and for whatever reason, I don't even know how she kind of figured out whatever she figured out. We were playing, and I went to grab her hand, and she was like, "I'm not allowed to touch you. Your dad is a your dad is a nigger." I'm like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't even go home and repeat it. I remember hearing it, and and it was just like, oh, okay, my dad's that, whatever, and then you just kind of dismissed it, and it really wasn't anything that was said. It wasn't anything that I heard. So there really was no response until I recognized that when my dad was around, people looked at us different. I remember vividly being a kid and always wanting to hold my dad's hand.
Yeah.
People walking in public, because I would see people looking weird, and I felt something different. I don't know if my parents were aware of my awareness of it. And I think they're watching too. I kind of gave them a link and tried to tell them how to get on Facebook, but I never want to disrespect them as the way they raised me, because they did not raise. It was a really truly raising to see colorblind.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can't be.
Right.
And it was the reality the other day coming on and thinking about doing this conversation here with you. I told my mother, I said to her, she said, well, I never, my girlfriend continues to tell me, she says, you're white racist. You're biased towards white people. You are a racist. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I have to identify that I might be a bias. I don't trust white people other than my mother and my grandmother, God rest in peace, and the people that are in my family that are white, because of what I saw. And my mom said, well, I never raised you to be biased like that, or so to speak, or racist like that, or having those feelings. I said, but you didn't raise me to understand white culture. I only identified with the defense of not even said defensive. I think that's an inappropriate word. I think having to be welcomed in an African American or in a Black culture and not rejected there. Like there was room for me in that lane. And there wasn't room for me with the people outside of that at a point in my life. It's just what my experience with Caucasian relationships and things have been kind of jaded based off of the things that have happened that I've watched my dad go through, and my mom. It marks you when being on a porch one day. Say, for instance, I could tell you a personal story, extremely personal, but
If you want, yeah.
yeah, if you don't mind, I've had someone react and say, the neighbor across the street, my mother and I were there, and we were drunk Franciscan college students. It was prior to it being Franciscan University. It was a college of Steubenville at the time. And they had a place across the street. And they were just frat house all over. I mean, party. They get it in, even when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And they had made a comment and yelled across the street, "Oh, I had nigger lover. There's a nigger baby." And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. And my mom is like, all right, we got something for you. And I've never looked at her as white because she's always been with my dad. It's like, this is that tough, black lady. I don't know what she was. She was just like that lady that was with my dad.
Yeah.
All my dad and me. And she was like, all right. And I remember her telling my father, and he was like, just get down. And I'm like, what's happening? So we watched this. I watched my dad, who is an awesome, and he's watching if you are high. Phenomenal man. Powerhouse protector and defender of everything that is right. I watched him walk across the street. I watched my mother get on the phone and make phone calls. I watched folks from all over. This was in the 70s. I watched folks, the neighbors come out. They knew it was going to be something. I watched the street fill up. I watched my dad kick that door into that house. Thank God he didn't go to jail. But he kicked the door into the house, went up to the second floor where they were drinking and drunk, and tossed the kids and the bodies and all just handled it. This is what, And I realized that was a moment that shocked me, that wow. And shortly after that, they did move. I realized that's what I was.
Yeah.
And that's what my mom was. And that kind of, excuse me, I do get a little weepy.
Okay.
Because those are scars, but they're healing scars. They're my life, my story, but they're still scars.
Sure.
And they do hurt sometimes. And, another instance, I remember in Weirton, they had a radio station. That's another thing we joke about. I said, my dad called in. That's before they had the live panels. And you could just get in. So he was agreeing with the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, who was actually in Weirton across the bridge, which is 2 seconds from my home.
Right.
And we're on a speaker in the radio. And he tells me our address. And he's like, look, I'm right here. He says, what if I got everybody in my group? I'll never forget it. And it's the coolest statement I ever heard in my dad's life. He said, what if I call us a cool colored cats and call us the KKK? And I got something here waiting on it.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend, she went up, she's like, was that your dad on the radio? And it was like, I became this like hero in her eyes. And it was like, yeah, my dad, the KKK, the cool color guy. I didn't know. But, then you hear your grandparents talk. Stories, it's the stories. And to think that now, I think at 54, being who I am, I'm done being told that Black people don't matter. I understand where people get upset as Black lives matter. Yes, they do. In this moment, yes, they do. Because for the last 54 years of my life, my Black father's life didn't matter like it did to my white mom. My white mom has white privilege. I have white privilege. All I have to do is not tell anyone that I have a Black father. I've never felt like I could ever do that. And she's like, well, you're kind of like forgetting about me. I'm like, no, I wear you. I wear my mom.
Yeah.
And I defend what I love, and that's them. That's their love. Black lives do matter. I have an officer, and he's in the middle of it. And he's doing it the right way. I have a brown one who I worry about constantly because he's got dreadlocks clean down to here, and he's a Marine, former Marine, served his country, and then I have a baby boy who's got a wild blonde hair, blue-eyed, curly afro, clean out to here. Could be the white Jesus that they want to tear down. It could be him. It's like it could be. But I get it. It's just something that we need to have a discussion. We need to have a real conversation and offend people.
Tell me more about that.
I think you have to offend people because you have to touch on those places that are tender. Usually, when you're offended, something's triggered. I mean, at least in my personal experience, when you're offended, you have to kind of find out why you're offended and why that bothers you. Like it's, how can I say this? I'm trying to stay in my lane here. When I have family on both sides that say that it should be all lives matter, then you have family that say blue lives matter. And I have family that's Black lives matter. It's a multi-personality disorder in my head to try and navigate it.
Sure.
Yeah, multiple personalities. Trust me, trying to stay in a conversation and stay in your lane and not offend and be aware of that culturally. That's even more intense navigating that land. So I offend all the time.
I'm sure you do.
Let's kind of, I offend all the time, and I have a tendency to navigate to the safe places. Usually, like Janice got on me, she's like, I notice when we go out in public, you kind of sit with your back where you're aware, you're aware of the surroundings, but your back is aware and you see it all. I said, because I have a tendency to want to see what's coming at me. I will navigate towards an African-American crowd before I would navigate towards a Caucasian crowd. I don't want to have that confrontation. Like, look, I don't want to hear you saying nothing crazy, just in case you feel like flipping off, calling somebody a nigger in here and just, having something not to pop off, because that's going to be me. I love the one in the room that's going to scare everybody. I said, if there is a Klan's worst nightmare, that'd be me. They created this.
Yeah.
And when I think of conversations, like when I see people saying, you don't have a right to speak. And I got livid weeks ago. There's a meme going around with the 3 Black girls and the one light skin, and they said the one doesn't fit. My niece had posted the image. And it just it hurt me. Yeah. And I made a comment on my Facebook page. I said, I have been 2 fists up all my life. And I will fight on both sides. I've been swinging at white people. I've been swinging at Black people. I've been swatting stereotypes. I've been trying to navigate. I've been trying to be the bridge. I have been attempting to do all of these things. And somewhere along the line, I'm sick of being all that to everybody without having people know why it's important to just understand today, tomorrow, until it's resolved. Matter, because this should have been addressed. These cultural differences. Rape was rape. House niggers, porch niggers. People are gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. Yeah. Field and house and all of these things. Rape was rape. Yeah. Just because someone was in the house and got bred out to be whatever it was. That descendant line was bred out to be something else. That's all it was. Yeah. Just because you didn't get to come into a house. Now we have that division. You have division amongst our own kind, our own people, our own race. It's not just white people who are doing these things. But Black has to matter because it's many shades and it's diverse and it's painful And it does offend, because a lot of it was not created by Black culture. Black culture was created because of a lack of anything else. We've taken whatever there has been,
Yes,
and made a song about it, or made a dance about it, or made an understanding about it, or made a religion about it, or made a path. But it's always been made. And the land is crying out now. It's not just, it's blood of the land that's crying out. Like, what was her name? I wrote it down. Dr. Kirksey.
yeah.
When she did the drum.
What did that bring up for you?
I heard the Native Americans. I heard some of my family. I heard me easily saying part of my culture, Yahweh, 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 and I heard myself on that. And then I heard the drum beats of people that I've never met, who I'm sure, I mean, I have history, lineage, that were owned. And I don't know what that sound would have been like. I don't know what the Finnish and Swedish side of my mother's drum beat would be from Finland and Sweden. They came here poor with nothing, one came with money, one come without, my great grandparents. And I don't know what those drum beats sound like. If when she stopped that, I was sitting there listening, I was like, oh my God. It's like it just reminded me that the land is crying. So much blood, so much to own up to let's just own it and find out how we work past ownership. I don't and point another finger, because there's always going to be the people that are going to talk back and clap back, and they're always going to say this is that and that is this, and that's not what it means. And I'm like, if all lives mattered in the womb and you pro-life yourself, where do we navigate that once we hit this earth, we still have to have that same value? Sorry.
No, I'm just breathing a sigh with you, because that just so much there. But
it's a lot to unpack, and I don't think, mentally unpacking it, mentally unpacking it to people who aren't ready for what I have to say. I don't think most of the people that are probably listening to this, that have heard this, really have no idea that that's how I feel, because I don't get into these deep conversations. I don't, they know me, but they don't understand that as an adult now me.
Right.
As an adult now me, the person that wanted to go into psychology, or the person that wanted to go into like social work and help, and the different things that I stopped doing or didn't do or moved away from based on just foolishness in my youth. They don't understand that those things are still a part of me. Those are still scars. There's still things that are marked in me that probably won't go away. And my parents did a phenomenal job. That's a 2-parent household. My dad worked. My mom never had to work. When they got married, he made her quit her job. That's the kind of man he was. We were never, ever without. We may not have had, but my dad worked until he didn't work.
Right.
He was a strong man and a strong provider, and still is.
Yeah. We have a question for you that came through.
Sure.
From our friend Janice. I'm just looking at the chat, and it's a bold question, and it's one I was going to ask a similar one to earlier. So it's, how do you handle, Kimberly, the trauma you've experienced? Or when you talk about these wounds or scars, I was going to ask, and it may not be a perfect answer or a perfect solution, but what has helped you experience some healing?
I think what is helping me and has helped me to heal a lot of those things is a clear understanding that now at 54, people don't have the tools and resources to know that they're missing information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they weren't educated to understand.
Mm-hmm.
They saw, and they only saw half of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So releasing them into that wherever they go, I can dismiss that
Mm-hmm.
as, okay, that was then. And that is easy to let that go and to let those things go that way. Now, current scars and the things that I see currently in the world, when I see the dismissive things and the dismissive comments, that to me is fresh wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Those are, I'm trying to navigate a way to, through, I think this is the opening of a door for me to navigate through understanding how I need to approach this going forward, because you want to make sure that when you educate, it's necessary to walk through and educate someone, like I had an episode where I was one time I was a hairdresser and I had a general manager. He was a Black GM that they sent in to check the store.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing a quota checks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listed as African American, as a hairdresser and a female. Unbeknownst to me, I'm checking all of these boxes. I can make your company look really good on paper if you hire me. You know what I mean? That's the kind of, I can make you look good on paper type of person. He came into the salon looking for the Black girl who knew how to do clipper cuts and buzz cuts. They send me up and he's like, oh, okay, you know how to do clippers? And I just looked at him and I just busted out laughing. I was like, sure, yeah, come on, sit down. And he was like, you from South? That's the first thing he said.
Yeah.
He understood my accent. He's like, and I don't have it. I don't have an accent. I think it's just me sounding whatever people sound like that are supposed to be Black. I don't know. And then I explained to him who I was. He said, I was looking there. They said there was a Black girl in here working or whatever. I was like, yeah, talking to her. You're talking to her. He was like, wow. Okay. Very cool. And it was like an experience for him. Like I'm an anomaly on both sides, but he understood it. He understood it. And he helped me and he spoke to me about where I was. And he was like, you do realize that I'm here because of an issue with someone Black. What is your perception? So we found each other, so to speak, and connected because he didn't have anyone. We found each other on a manager level, supervisory level, and associate level where he knew he was going to get an honest answer from me. And no sooner than he walked out of the room, someone had said something to the effect of, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Do you ever get tired of educating? Because that's something I've heard from a couple of our guests. Yeah.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I'm learning to not be disrespectful in my education because I got sick of taking it and I could easily, maturely, thank God for it, but I could easily see myself visually. In my head, I do smack the spit out of some people. I literally look at them and I'm like, that's what it looks like when your head explodes. Carry on. Yes, I'll listen. You kind of have that moment where you just know that you're not going to get anywhere with that. And you just have to let it go.
Sure. So what do you see as the path forward? Because you did a beautiful job describing just really how much pain there is in the land, throughout the land, and with this bloodshed. And you painted such good descriptions about how it's not just Black versus white, but even within Black culture or within white culture, there's these divisions. I hate to say white culture, but Eurocentric culture. Yeah. How do you, what do you see as the path forward? If you had your way, if you could wave your magic wand.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Now, see, that is something that nobody should ever ask me. I think if I had a way to wave my magic wand and have everyone take that pause, we would switch sides. We would switch sides. Everybody that's white would be black or brown or yellow. And everybody that is black would get to go right on into what they think happens in the white world. And we would see each other's perspective. That I would do, and I would make it a mandatory 7-day, and then we would all come back to the table, and everybody then would be allowed to speak.
I'm down with that. I'm down with that.
That's a magic wand event, and we would see what that mindset is. And I think what's missing in all of it is empathy.
Yeah, for sure.
There is not a slice of empathy when a person can easily dismiss you by the color of your skin. Not knowing a story, not knowing the history behind someone's struggles. There's an African proverb I'm going to butcher it, but there's a proverb that says the children will burn down the village just to fill that fire. They're going to burn down that whole village. People are saying, why is the riots are happening? Why is this happening? Why are they doing what they're doing? There's always going to be those people that are white and black that are going to destroy things. But if I show you long enough something that you cannot have, it's never been yours, it's never been your land, you never got your 40 acres, you never got your mule whip. I'm not justifying that. But in my perspective, and I know my family, some of their family perspectives will be completely annoyed that I'm saying it. Some will cheer me on and some will have a neutral stand on it. Doesn't matter to me at this point. It's just like dumping my emotions so everybody knows the next time they see me what they'll be dealing with. But you think that they are doing this because that's what they know. There's nothing left. There's nothing. Why wouldn't they burn it?
No.
You're not giving it to them. Every time a goal is set, you move a marker.
Right.
Every time a touchdown needs to be made, it's 50 yards back. There's another hoop to jump through. You know, our local officer here, our local, not officer, I want to say officer, but he's a city manager here. There was a Black Lives Matter rally, and his response live on tape, when someone had posed a question about why aren't there more officers in our city, Black officers. I couldn't hear muffled, but then I heard the answer echoing as if the world silenced him long enough for everybody to just go, ugh, that we're not going to lower our standards. Wait a minute. You're not going to lower your standards to get more Black people? Like we let that slide on a live, and it was his DNA that was 2 generations back that had a consent decree over our city in the 70s for police brutality.
Yeah.
We had 10 years or 12 years of that in the 70s when I was coming up. People were getting their teeth knocked out and their brains knocked out. My Uncle Joe he got snatched up by the cops, being with a white lady in the 70s. My aunt had in the 70s, local here in the 70s while I was a kid, had her garage sprayed with KKK, nigger get out, and a crossbar here in the city.
Yeah.
You know, this is the 70s. I'm talking about just my lifetime. You're talking about decades of stuff before me, generations of stuff before me, of struggle. But in my lifetime, the hatred that I've seen towards Blacks.
Yeah.
No wonder why people feel like they do. And Black lives do matter because they haven't, in my eyes, for a long time. They haven't. They've mattered in my family because we are defenders of all of that and then some, but to most people, it don't matter. You know, it does not, it's almost a slap in the face to anyone who, especially intelligent to say that we're going to lower our standards. No, what you need to do is find out why Black people don't want to be police officers. You want to find out why there is no incentives to police your own community. You want to find out why these programs aren't in place. That's what we want. Or, well, at least that's what I think we want. We should want, you know. Why aren't these things in place? For no one's asking you to lower your standards. We'll pass those. We've worked twice as hard as everybody else anyway. We helped build this place without getting any credit for it, for crying out loud.
Right.
I mean, the Indians did too, you know, everybody did the railways. Look, I mean, they brought them over as slaves. They're Indian, and you work twice as hard.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you work twice as hard. My dad's always worked twice as hard too.
Yeah. So the foot in both worlds issue, which we've talked so much about in this conversation, you know, if I may ask, because you referenced this in passing, but part of where my heart breaks is, I mean, I've loved a police officer. I've formerly dated someone who's a police officer, and you know good police officers and good people in fire safety. And like you said, you have a son, who's law enforcement, who's an officer. How does that feel in this climate?
Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. Devastating. Because he was raised to stay away from the bad actors.
Yeah.
You know, that's my grandfather's phrase. That's my dad's phrase. That's my phrase. That's generations of that same line, stay away from the bad actors. It's appropriate that it's raining now here. But it's horrible. It's horrible to think that I have a son who has to do his job, who took the job to do it, being a representation of who he is as a man. And they know he's a man of color. He doesn't, I don't walk around going, hey, I'm mixed, or hey, I've never had that luxury, nor has he. He could pass, but he doesn't. But he doesn't have to defend himself because he's in his 30s. You know, it's like that's what they know. They whatever that is whatever that is with younger generation. I never came up that. I had a title. But it's horrible. It's horrible to think that he is standing there being called a racist or a bigot or a pig or you know, or being spit on and saying, why do you hate us? Why do you, when all of his family are Black and mixed, and he identifies, he understands, he knows the culture, he knows the white culture, he knows it all, and he's being called a racist. And he's being charged with a label that he's not even allowed to defend or explain in a uniform. Like he can't just turn around and say, just shut up for a minute and drop everything in the middle of whatever is going on that he has to face. You know, and that's scary because of the climate of people saying, if you're not with us, you're against us. All officers need to do this. Yes, they do. I can't make my son or anyone else's son, or no officer is going to make another officer do this or that, but they are having to speak up. They need to be accountable. And I know who his core is, and I know what his character is. I don't doubt that he would. You know, I don't doubt that he would not just defend that immediately, like, stop it. This, you know, or report it. I know who he is. I've had that discussion with him. But it's his life that I worry about from my own views on what I've seen. He's in danger for sure now. And it is horrible. It's horrible. Yeah. But I understand that it's who he is, and he has to live his truth in his life. And he'll have a story that'll matter to someone, and he'll have a perspective that's different than mine. And that's what you build on. You just have to build on the authenticity of the content of a person's true character. Eventually has to rise. It has to.
Yes.
It has to. It has to. It's long overdue.
Yeah. So, how's it feeling now that you've opened the door and spoken on this publicly?
It It feels great. It feels like a release, and it's a deep breath that I have been waiting to exhale for a long time. If you hold your breath long enough, you're eventually going to pass out. And thank you for saving me from passing out.
Oh, I it's my
I
privilege
appreciate that.
and pleasure, and I'm so impressed by what you said about empathy being a big part of the solution here, because I mean, part of the textbook definition of empathy is the willingness to walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And I really like what you said about, trade places here for a certain amount of time before you even have a right to
7
come.
days.
Yeah, 7 days.
Yeah, I don't give you 24 hours. That's too easy of a, because in 7 days of my life, it's been through hell mentally
Right.
preparing for this, thinking of the black folks that I'm going to offend, the white folks that I'm going to not defend, the middle ground of the whole thing, and making sure that the movement of Black Lives Matter stays the movement and is not hijacked in my conversation. Like I said, it's a multiple personality disorder type of thing. You have to keep everything organized mentally.
Right.
You keep it organized mentally.
Yet I do believe people who do that, do it with grace like you do, and are rising to the challenge, are the people who are going to change the world. Because you can see things from multiple sides and multiple perspectives, and call people from any side that's in the wrong on their stuff. So I just appreciate your willingness to do that, and your appreciate to have this conversation with me. It really is a privilege.
Thank you.
So you're here on Facebook. If people want to reach out to you, you said you're on Instagram too?
Yeah, pecan tan 66. And it's a pecan tan because I had to choose a color that at least like something at one point in time that's kind of like not a crayon pasty white, and it's not a dark brown, and it's not a yellow, but it's a pecan type of color if you catch me on a good day in the sun.
Right.
Pecan tan 66.
I love that. And I appreciate your humor and your candor. And I do hope you are taking care of yourself, because I am hearing that this is exhausting to navigate. It's exhausting to navigate. It's exhausting to educate.
Yeah, it is. And I am taking care of myself. I have a good group of people that check me on a regular basis. Janice is one of them.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. I'm sure our friend Janice does.
Yeah, she checks me, and I have my girlfriend Cindy, and I have my sis Casey. I call her my sis. She's my kid's aunt. I have some good people that keep me in line. Like I said, Casey was the one that called me out. She was like, everybody that, I swear you're racist. And we had this discussion. She's like, I swear you're racist. You need to look at that. And this, I'm like, no, I'm not. And she's, black girl, black family member. She's like, no, you really are. She said, you do have a problem. When I had to start examining it because she said it, and she said it more than one time, and she's got carte blanche to say that. So it's like, yeah, okay, all right. I had to tell her she was right a couple of days ago, and she was basking in that fact that she was right.
Well, I think the call to look at ourselves is really how we change the world, if we respond to that call, because we have to do the work first for ourselves. And I love what you said about empathy. And the one other point I wanted to highlight is what I've observed in my work, granted from the Caucasian perspective, but as a trauma-informed clinician, is so many problems are caused when any one of us thinks that the way it was for us is the way it was for everybody else. And and that's such a problem to me, because even when I speak out in recovery circles, everybody is usually free to and I could go on my soapboxes too about, well, this is what I did and this is how I overcame it. But if you know what your experience is for you, and so much of the problems we're encountering is we try to put our experience on everyone else, and that's not empathetic.
Yes, and I think that's like part of what triggered it all. It's like, if you're not with us, you're against us. But some of the language I get, because it has been that way. We need people with us. I told my girlfriend Cindy, I'll say she's white, I just for video's sake, but I told her, I says, what we need is for people to understand, you go before us this time.
Yes.
You go before us. The whole notion of you're my ally and you're this and you're that word just showed up out of nowhere. It's like, well, you were my friend last week. Now all of a sudden, now you're an ally and a defender. We hadn't done that prior to this. Now, what the heck? Why is this big, nice social hashtag ally coming up for? It's like, no, that's not what you heard last week. You never jumped into these conversations that I had over my lifetime, and no, that's not. You earn the right to be called an ally based on just silent movement. Navigate the front line, navigate the mid ground, navigate the tail end, come up behind the rear and make sure nobody's coming to stab us in the back if you're going to be an ally. Circle around us on the sides, pull us into community, show us what you know, open those resources up to us of how you all get these amazing loans and how you all get the favor of the low interest rates and these amazing credit cards and these great deals and these homes and these lands. Show us what we've already been aware of that exists that we are still trying to attain. And maybe these things will also help alleviate a lot of the problems emotionally that we feel coming up. But Black lives matter.
Amen.
They have to. They have to. And you can say all lives matter after that, but make sure you say Black lives matter first, because those lives are the ones that are still playing catch up. They're still running the track race. Nobody told them that the track has been lengthened.
Thank you. Such a good note to end on. And for people who are still watching at 5 o'clock, we have a very special guest who'll be joining us on the live cast. And we have another live cast coming up next Tuesday at noon with Lisa Hayes. So Lisa Hayes is one of our team members with the Institute for Creative Mindfulness, who'll be talking on the LGBT plus experience in the Black community and advocating for Black queer lives. So please join us next Tuesday. And then tonight at 6:30, we have our usual meditation group here on Institute for Creative Mindfulness. Kimberly, until we get to meet in person, I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too.